The year is 1274. A huge fleet is sailing across the Sea of Japan. Hundreds of ships sent by Kublai Khan. On board are Mongol, Chinese, and Korean soldiers, united under one goal: the invasion of Japan. Their first target lies ahead, the small island of Tsushima. On the island, the local governor, Sō Sukekuni, gathers what little force he has. Around 80 samurai and their helpers prepare to face the coming army. They know the odds. They know no help will come. Still, they choose to fight. In the late 1200s, the Mongol Empire was a force of nature. Built by Genghis Khan and expanded by his descendants, it was the largest land empire in history, a powerful force that had crushed kingdoms from Hungary to China. By 1271, the great Khan Kublai had conquered most of China and started his own Yuan dynasty. But his ambition wasn't satisfied. His eyes turned eastward across the sea to a nation that had long lived cut off from the world. Japan. For the Japanese, the world beyond their shores was a distant problem. The real power in Japan wasn't the emperor in Kyoto, but the military government. The Kamakura shogunate, run by the samurai. Their entire world was built on honor, fighting skill, and a fierce code of conduct later known as Bushi. It was a society of formal combat, where a warrior's worth was proven in individual acts of bravery. They were masters of their own islands, and had never faced a major foreign threat. The Mongols were just a rumor, a brutal story from a land far away. That all changed in 1268. A letter arrived from Kublai Khan. It wasn't a friendly greeting. It was an ultimatum: submit and become a vassal state, or be invaded. For the Khan, this was standard practice. For the samurai of Japan, it was an unthinkable insult. They refused, sending the Mongol messengers home with a message of silent defiance. Kublai Khan wasn't a man who took no for an answer. His plans were delayed by his war in southern China. But he didn't forget. He saw Japan as a land of rumored riches, and its defiance was a challenge to his power. By 1274, he was ready. The Khan assembled a massive invasion force of Mongol, Chinese, and Korean soldiers. From the ports of Korea, a fleet of around 900 ships prepared to sail, a floating city of war. Japanese sources from that time claimed they carried about 40,000 warriors, though modern historians believe that number may have been exaggerated. This was an instrument of pure conquest, and its first target was the small island that stood as the gateway to Japan. Tsushima. Tsushima was a rugged, quiet outpost, a stepping stone between Korea and mainland Japan. It was ruled by the Sō clan, led by the elderly deputy governor Sō Sukekuni. He was a seasoned warrior, a man who lived and breathed the samurai code of duty. On November 4th, 1274, that quiet life ended forever. Lookouts spotted the unbelievable. The horizon had vanished, blocked out by a forest of shipmasts. The Mongol invasion fleet had arrived. To the defenders on the shore, however, the force must have seemed infinite. Panic was met with duty. Sō Sukekuni knew his situation was hopeless. He had only his personal group of about 80 mounted samurai and their helpers. 80 men against an army of thousands. Logic demanded surrender. It would have saved lives and spared the island. But for a samurai, the choice wasn't between victory and defeat. Victory was impossible. The choice was between a life of shame and an honorable death. They would not surrender. They would fight. As the invaders began landing in the dead of night, Sukekuni made one last attempt at diplomacy. But his messenger was driven back by a shower of arrows. The Mongol message was clear. There would be no talk, only conquest. As his men prepared, a fire reportedly broke out at the local shrine to Hachiman, the god of war. Some accounts say white doves gathered there as it burned, a sign Sukekuni chose to see as a divine omen. He gathered his 80 horsemen. They weren't trying to defend the island. They were preparing to die for it. With their armor laced and swords drawn, they rode to Komoda Beach, waiting for the dawn and their charge into legend. The battle began before dawn when the first waves of invaders stormed the beach. What happened next wasn't just a fight. It was a violent collision of two completely different ways of war. The samurai way was all about individual heroism. A warrior would ride out, announce his name and family, and challenge an enemy of equal rank to a duel. They were masters of the longbow, picking off specific targets from horseback with deadly precision. So, Sukekuni and his 80 men started the fight the only way they knew how, loosing a volley of arrows that found their marks before drawing their long tochi swords and charging. But the Mongols didn't care about honor or duels. They were a disciplined modern army that fought as one unit. They advanced in dense formations, a wall of shields moving to the beat of massive war drums. Their archers used shorter composite bows, firing in massive coordinated volleys that darkened the sky, making it impossible for the samurai to single out opponents. A samurai who charged in looking for a duel was simply swarmed and cut down. Then came the weapon that truly terrified the Japanese: early gunpowder bombs. The Mongols used hand-thrown explosives, known as tetsu or thunder crash bombs, primitive gunpowder shells that exploded with a deafening roar, spewing smoke and fragments. The noise panicked the Japanese horses, shattering their cavalry charges and turning the battlefield into a hellscape of fire and sound the samurai had never experienced. Despite the shock and the overwhelming odds, the 80 samurai fought with a ferocity that stunned the invaders. When they got into close quarters, their superior swordsmanship was devastating. The Japanese sword was a masterfully crafted blade, and in the hands of a trained samurai, it was a terrifying weapon. Japanese chronicles even claimed that one samurai, Sō Sukekuni, cut down 25 enemy soldiers himself. Though this number is likely legendary, Sō Sukekuni led charge after charge, a symbol of defiance in the face of certain death. They fought with the courage of men who had already accepted their fate. But courage couldn't stop an avalanche. For every invader who fell, 10 more took his place. The samurai were swallowed by the horde, their individual skill lost in the sheer mass of the enemy. As the day wore on, the battle on Komoda Beach became a brutal one-sided slaughter. The samurai, exhausted and dwindling in number, were pushed back from the shore. They were completely surrounded, their charges broken. Yet there was no thought of retreat. They would die as samurai on their feet, swords in hand. The final moments of the battle were a testament to their code. Sō Sukekuni, seeing his force all but destroyed, gathered his few remaining men for one last suicidal charge into the heart of the Mongol army. It was there, in a final blaze of glory, that Sukekuni was finally killed, falling in defense of his home. By sunset, the battle was over. The vast majority of the 80 samurai and their helpers lay dead on the beach. Their last stand had ended. For the Mongols, it was a victory, but a costly one. With the defenders gone, they unleashed their fury on the island, burning buildings and killing civilians. From Tsushima, the Mongol fleet moved to the nearby island of Iki, where another small garrison of samurai made a similarly heroic but doomed defense. Iki fell, and its people suffered the same fate. The Mongol war machine seemed unstoppable, and it was now pointed directly at the Japanese mainland. In military terms, the sacrifice at Tsushima was a defeat, but their fight wasn't pointless. During the chaos, a few survivors managed to escape on a small boat, carrying a desperate warning to the shogunate's headquarters on the mainland. The message was simple: the Mongols are here. The blood of the 80 samurai had bought the rest of Japan precious time to prepare. The news of the fall of Tsushima and Iki, and the incredible bravery of their tiny garrisons, spread like wildfire. The sacrifice of Sō Sukekuni and his men was no longer a military defeat. It became a national myth. It was a rallying cry, a symbol of a spirit where honor meant more than life. The story of 80 warriors charging an army of thousands gave the nation a symbol of defiance. When the Mongol fleet finally reached Hakata Bay on the mainland, they weren't met by an unprepared country. A larger organized force of samurai was waiting. They had learned from the reports from Tsushima. They knew duels were useless. Instead, they used fortifications and launched daring night raids in small boats, attacking the massive Mongol ships under the cover of darkness. The fighting was fierce, but the Mongols couldn't secure a strong foothold. Then, as their fleet was anchored in the bay, a powerful storm hit. The Japanese would later call this typhoon the Kamikaze, or divine wind. It smashed hundreds of ships against the shore and each other, drowning thousands of invaders. The first invasion was broken. An enraged Kublai Khan launched a second, even larger invasion in 1281. But by then, the Japanese were fully prepared. They had built a massive stone wall along Hakata Bay to prevent a landing, and after weeks of fighting, a second, even more powerful Kamikaze struck, annihilating almost the entire Mongol fleet. The dream of conquering Japan died in the storm. In the grand history of the Mongol invasions, the battle on Tsushima is often just a footnote, a swift and brutal defeat. But its real importance isn't measured by who won or lost. The last stand of Sō Sukekuni and his 80 samurai is a story about the power of the human spirit against impossible odds. Their sacrifice wasn't in vain. It was the warning that allowed Japan to prepare, and the legend that inspired a nation to fight back. The story of the 80 warriors who charged into oblivion became a cornerstone of the samurai identity, a reminder that some principles are worth dying for. It was a battle they were destined to lose, but a legend they were certain to win.